Welcome back to another instructional video for Architecture 243. This is going to cover a little bit of what we talked about in class today. This is Thursday the 20th. We talked a lot about different ways to pop contrast and color and things like that. And we also talked a lot about layer masks and a little bit about adjustment masks and things like that. So this is sort of a run through of that. This is a finished product. Well, it's not really a finished product. It's very much work in progress as far as the design and rendering goes, but finished product as far as where we're wanting to go with the layer mask and adjustment layer with the adjustment layer mask attached to it. So here's the starting. So just like we starting image. So just like in the beginning of the class today, we talked about going to masks, saying add layer mask, and notice it automatically converted that to layer 0. That's because you can't mask off a background layer. So if you add a pixel mask to it, it says, okay, this can't be a background layer, obviously, so we're going to swap it out. So I'm going to add a new layer here. A little pro tip is if you hold down Control and hit New Layer, it adds it below rather than adding it above in the stack. So that can save you about 2 seconds, but still worth knowing. And so let's do Shift F5, or Edit Fill is the same command. And let's fill this with white. So that if we turn this off, basically what I did is I created a new layer down here and I filled it with white. So that's what we're looking at there. So let's go to this layer mask. And this is identical to what we talked about in class today, so I'll go a little bit fast. Start painting with black. Because this is just a meaningless texture out here. This isn't a terribly attractive part of the model. It's typical for a city massing model. You can never really get out. I mean, you got to stop somewhere, right? When you're massing out your plan. So I'm just clicking again and again. And if I hit X, I would be painting white. And so like we talked about in class, as I paint here, and like we also talked about in video 4, as I paint here, black hides and white reveals. So anywhere there's white on this little strip, I can see that layer. Anywhere there's black, I can not see that layer. So if I hit white, I can actually paint away that black, revealing the image. Maybe give a nice vignette there. Paint it back in a bit with X, hit X and paint it back in. Now I want to do something else to give a bit smoother effect, and this is something we didn't talk about. If you select your mask and you go to the Masks tab, this is the button we use to create a new one. There's also Density, which we want to leave at 100%, and then Feather, which will smooth out. So it just gives you a cleaner edge. Feather's sometimes something to stay away from, but in this case, it can give you a nice clean edge. So now what I want to do is, we've got that kind of established. So if we right click on this and say Disable Layer Mask, we'll see we're back where we were. If we right click and say Enable Layer Mask, when you're painting, make sure you're on this icon also. Make sure you're on this thumbnail. So that is good, but we want to take it another step further. So let's go to Adjustments, and this is similar to what we talked about last time. I'm going to say Hue and Saturation. So Hue and Saturation. And this is similar to video 4, like I said, and let's just back this saturation off. And so now there is no color here. It is a monochromatic image, or it's a black and white image, grayscale. So I'm going to go to the layer mask of this hue and saturation layer, and I'm going to hide it by painting black. And so now, as if by magic, the color comes back. So this gives us that sort of focal point, like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to look, you know. And maybe we want to turn down the opacity of our brush, so just click on opacity and drag. So a very conceptual bird's eye, certainly. Certainly. But, and I'm clicking like mad, as you can probably see by my flashing cursor. So you can kind of get the idea of what happens here is maybe we want a bit more gray here at the end of the street to really de-emphasize, to say this is definitely the end over here, but then hit black and make darn sure you're actually seeing the color here. And so, and again, we could go to masks, feather this, give us a smoother transition. It's not as obvious here, is it? So, but that's okay. And then you can still go back and change the adjustment by selecting this little icon here, which normally you get like a thumbnail of the image, but there is no image with an adjustment layer. There's just the adjustment icon. You go to Adjustments. Make sure you're in Adjustments tab. And we could add the contrast back to that area, but we want to just keep it away. We could also take away the darkness, or inverse it with this darkness slider. So I'm going to make sure this is at 0. So, because I'm happy with this, and it's pretty similar to this. This is a bit more dramatically gray at the end. So we could make sure that we're really making sure. But there's a few other things about this image that have changed. So that's not the only reason that it would be that way, that it would be different. So just a work in progress, very conceptual bird's eye. It's a good use for, make sure that I go back here and get rid of any bright spots. Maybe back off on the feather slightly. There, I'm happy with that. So then we could go to the text tool by hitting T or going down here and clicking once, saying 18 points, maybe 24 points. Bird's eye perspective. And maybe saying Control A, selected all that text, by the way. Control A. We're going backing it off a little bit. Maybe we want 20 points. It's okay. So we would want more text than that, but just kind of a basic. And then if we hit F, we get kind of a mock full screen. F again gives us a very nice full screen with which to admire our handiwork. So that's a review of something that we talked about in class today. It's layer masks, both for layers and for adjustment layers. So hopefully that's a good review and shows it in yet another scenario.